ng makrusing lagot.
All right, this is a developing story, obviously, and no better way, Susie Gold, to deal with a developing story than to go right to Israel. Let's go to Jerusalem right now, live in Jerusalem. It's 9:06 a.m. in the morning. Tom Trento here in the United West Studios in South Florida. We have Jay, Mark, and Monty in the studio helping out, putting things together. Up north, we got Mary managing all the feeds and helping me handle the work in the studio is Susie Gold. So Jerusalem Jane, how about it? Let's go to Jerusalem.
So happy to have Jerusalem Jane again. You know, she left the comforts of America to go live in Israel.
Denmark. She was in Denmark.
From Denmark, and went to Israel. You've been living there how long, Jerusalem Jane?
Oh my goodness, a long time. I started just coming here on a tourist visa, just getting a feel for the city and asking God, you know, what's my purpose? And now I have been here officially almost 6 years on a journalist visa. So yeah. So what happened today, you know, every time something like this happened, my heart just drops. And at the same time, it has happened so many times. I'm like, not again. Not again. You see this young soldier, he was 21 years old, standing, waiting for the light rail. I was there 3 days ago, passing by. Tom, you know where this is. This is at Ammunition Hill, just across from the big police headquarters. People are standing there. It's 1:30 in the afternoon, just waiting. You can take the train. You can also take buses. It's like a hub in that area. And all of a sudden, this, according to what the media is saying now, a 17-year-old female terrorist just runs up with this knife, and she just jabbed it in the back of two guys. And as you saw in the video, it's still in the back of this young soldier sitting there completely paralyzed. And then there are always heavily armed guards at the light rails now, because that's a reality here. So they neutralized her. They took her out.
All right, let's go right to Barry Shaw up in a little further north of Jerusalem, Jane. Barry, welcome to the show. It's been a busy weekend in Israel, but Jane's reporting that this is a female. I didn't know that. What happens when a female jihadi, they call it a lone wolf, better to be a known wolf. This is a jihadi from instigated by an organization or individual somewhere. What happens? We have on the screen a picture of the knife, and this is as tough as the picture is. It's normal treatment. They stabilize the knife so it doesn't do further injuries. They leave it there because you're a nurse. Why do they leave it in there, nurse?
Not to cause further injury, and wait until you get to the right medical attention and have a surgeon make sure that they take it out and that it's done in the best way possible, not to cause more harm.
And it's blocking the blood from coming out. Obviously, it's a bizarre situation. But Barry Shaw, what happens to the family of this young woman now that she's been neutralized, which probably means dead? Is she ostracized from the Islamic community in the state of Israel?
Don't be naive, Tom. The lady has gone to meet her 7 virgins to remember. And her family are going to be rewarded by the Palestinian pay-to-slay policy, partly funded by the Biden administration. So everybody's hunky-dory over there. She's become a female martyr. She's gone to meet her maker. She'll get her 7 virgins and her family on the road to riches, thanks to payments of European governments and now reinstated by the Biden administration.
Now, Barry, are you being facetious when you say?
No, I may be facetious about going to meet her virgins, but I'm absolutely not facetious about the Biden administration. As I mentioned on an earlier show, you have to take this seriously. United West have to get involved in this politically. Is that the Biden administration have defied US law by giving money to the Palestinian Authority, knowing full well that they are going to fudge a lot of this money to pay for their pay-to-slave program. And that goes to either the Palestinian terrorists who have carried out terror attempts have been caught and sitting in Israeli jail, or they go to the family of what they call the martyrs over there. And if you think this stops just with the terrorists that have been incited by the Palestinian Authority, you're wrong. Because the Palestinian Authority are committed to pay money to every terrorist of no matter which allegiance they have. In other words, the Palestinian Authority pay money to their political rivals, Hamas, in their terrorists manage to kill or maim Israelis, as they do on a fairly regular basis. So although the Palestinian Authority are at war, literally, not just politically at war, but at war with Hamas and have been, you know, all this latest violence, even the rockets, really was spawned out of the fact that Mahmoud Abbas cancelled the elections. And as I mentioned on another show, that actually they hate each other and they're using Israel and Israelis as the cannon fodder in their war one against the other.
A crazy situation. Two groups, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, they managed that. But Hamas won an election, as we know, in 2006 in Gaza. They're the officially recognized government in Gaza, though they're a designated terrorist organization here in the United States. And Barry's referring to laws we have now, the Taylor Force Act. Taylor Force was killed with a knife in Jaffa. We were there just a few days after that happened. The Taylor Force law was passed by the US Congress, which said you cannot fund the Palestinian Authority if they're going to pay 17-year-old girls to go kill Jews, and then their family gets rewarded for that. But that's happening because Joe Biden, I think it was on day 1 or day 2, removed the executive order. It wasn't an executive order. Violated the US Congress's law that's in effect right now. That's how bad the situation is. Barry, we have 5 minutes with you. Share with us the victory that the Hamas had in terms of being identified as the organization for the Arab street, and now they control, tell me if this is true, they control the agitation, the potential intifada in the future days in Israel. What's the situation with that? Versus
First of all, I want to tell you that Jane does a remarkable job. I don't know if she's still online, but she does a remarkable job. She's one of those individuals that really turns hearts and minds. But I want to tell you, Tom, we don't have peace over here. We have a ceasefire. The recent Hamas bombardments and the Arab rioting in Jerusalem and other places was basically a war between the wars. So we just have a ceasefire. We don't have peace. I'll give you an example, what you were talking about the Arabs. I don't know, you didn't pick up on this, but you know, today there was rioting on the Temple Mount with the Arabs. But it wasn't the Arabs against the Jews, and it wasn't the Arabs against the Israeli police. It was Arab against Arab. Don't you know that? What had happened
Arab
over the weekend?
Arab. How strange that is.
Yes. What happened on Friday prayers is the Imam of Jerusalem, the Mufti of Jerusalem, who's in the pay of the Palestinian Authority, he failed to mention anything to do with Hamas or praising Hamas. So some of the congregation in the mosque went wild in that mosque, and they told him to leave. They were shouting at him to shut up and get off the pulpit. And what happened today, the Arabs who were supporting the Palestinian Authority against Hamas took on the Arabs who were supporting Hamas, and there was rioting going on the Temple Mount today after morning prayers between Arabs against Arabs. And I've said it on your show repeatedly, when they're not killing Israel or going after Israel, they're going after each other.
Unbelievable.
So it's better when they fight each other. They leave the Jewish people alone.
Yeah, but then
but the problem is, Tom and Susie, you've got to be aware of this. That basically we're stuck with an international community is doing what they always do, living in a fantasy land. And they think by appeasing unrelenting enemies, they'll change their attitude. we had this eventually. Israel relented to the international community and the toughening line of Biden and agreed to a ceasefire, when really what we were after over there is what we would look at as total victory. This campaign was really to do even the people living in Gaza a big favor, and that would have been to get rid of Hamas. We could have achieved it in perhaps another week. I want to tell you, there was a poll on TV that didn't surprise me, that Israelis were polled as to whether they agreed with the ceasefire, whether they didn't agree with the ceasefire, or whether some people are undecided. And the majority of Israelis, and believe this is after 12 days of over 4,000 rockets from Gaza, the majority of Israelis said, we finished the ceasefire too soon. The Israelis wanted us to keep going until we managed to eradicate Hamas. And when you think about it, Tom and Susie, had we done that, we would have opened up the way for a possibility of a new Middle East, to get rid of an Islamic terror organization. Because what you've got here in Gaza is all the accoutrements of a state. The Gaza Strip has defined borders. It's bordered by Egypt in the south and Israel in the north and the Mediterranean in the west. It has its government apparatus in Gaza City, which is virtually its capital. It controls a population. In other words, it has all the accoutrements of state. So therefore, you have a terror state in Gaza. You could call it Gaza, you could call it Hamastan, or you can call it Palestine if they want. It's a state headed by an international designated terror organization. And yet the international community don't look at it like that. They look at it as we have to stop because it's best for the Middle East. No, it is not. They're making a same fatal mistake as these sort of international diplomats have been making for probably a century. It's the same sort of mistake as they made, for instance, when Britain, Chamberlain, went to appease Hitler. He went to Berlin and came back, if you remember, waving a piece of paper saying, peace in our time, right? And they allowed Hitler, for the sake of peace, to take over Sudetenland. And then they took over Czechoslovakia. And then he took over Poland. But they were convinced they were right in contraining Hitler and the Nazis. And it was really until the Nazis rolled across Europe and were on the other side of the English Channel and sending rockets into London that they managed to get rid of the Prime Minister and bringing another one called Churchill, who was based in real politics and not delusional thinking. And it's the same diplomats who are doing the same nonsense today. They want to stop Israel doing what the international community, and that was trying to get rid of an Islamic terror organization, an international designated terror organization. And they're doing the same with regard to the corrupt Palestinian Authority as well. They're giving them money as well to fund terrorism.
It's crazy stuff.
How can you expect a better world when the Western diplomats, the Western government think it's the wise thing to do?
But just a question, Barry, about what I wanted to know what your thoughts were about this quote unquote election for Abbas, and that he felt that he was going to lose to Hamas. Where does that stand now that Hamas has been weakened, not destroyed, but weakened?
Susie, Hamas in the Arab world has not been weakened at all. They actually strengthened. Whatever slim chance Mahmoud Abbas thought he had, and he didn't have many, he can't go to an election anymore. Hamas is going to win. Hamas has won the hearts and minds of a lot of Arabs living under the corrupt Palestinian authorities. They look at them and championing their cause. They're even influencing a section of the Israeli Arabs, which is a dangerous thing. So I wanted to bear this in mind, and I want your international diplomats, the Anthony Blinkens and people like this, to bear in mind, where they're talking about a two-state solution on 1967 borders. You know, maybe temporarily right now, Mahmoud Abbas is shuttling off his mortal coil. He's probably going through his last days. But what's happened if they force Israel. I can't believe it, because this is a project that we, as the Israel Institute of Strategic Studies, we are trying to budget making a movie called 1967, where we want to show the world, and we hope you not to get a copy to you guys at United West to show, because what we want to do is take you for a tour around the borders of Palestine 1967 with a camera, and you will see the other side of their border, and you will be shocked when you see what would be left of what I call the Trump state of Israel, living under 1967 borders, with Palestine controlling the high grounds and everything, and the streets, even to the streets across the street from the Jewish towns and houses in Jerusalem and other places. It's an impossibility. And yet Blinken and the State Department and your US Secretary of State, and also the United Nations representatives, this is the policy they will be keeping. Now, Blinken just said yesterday, he's coming to Israel and he's coming to say the only solution is a two-state solution. It absolutely is not a two-state solution. It's a solution to a disaster, because we would go to bed with Mahmoud Abbas and we will wake up the morning with Hamas. There is nothing that Anthony Blinken would do if they usurp power in Ramallah, which would be an easy thing for them to do now. So a two-state solution is going to endanger Israel even more.
All right, folks, you're listening to our dear friend Barry Shaw, an analyst, an author. All right, Barry, we got to let you go, but what's your latest book and how can people get in touch with you?
Actually, my latest book, Tom, Susie, you're going to love this book. I think I've got a book called A Tale of Love and Destiny. And it's a novel based on the life of a real heroine, a Jewish heroine, who led a major spy ring during wartime under the noses of the enemy. And the lady is called Sarah Aronson. She was a beautiful young woman who witnessed the Turkish slaughter, genocide of the Armenian Christians. And she realized that what they're doing against the Armenian Christians, they are going to do against the Palestinian Jews. This was pre-state Palestine, Susie. This is before, this is about 1911, 1912, 1917, that sort of period. And she led a band of spies, both in Palestine itself, in Syria, and also in Lebanon. And they reported back to the British about the movement of the Turkish and German troops in the Middle East after Britain had opened up a third front in the Palestine campaign to drive the Germans and the Turks out of Palestine.
Barry, we got about 2 minutes, Barry.
Right. You should get this book because it's an amazing story, and it really is a true story. Susie, a lot of women have read it, have told me they were crying in the book because it's a very dramatic story. Well, bit of a tragic ending, but everything I write about actually took place. The things that she did, the sort of stresses and strain she was under, as the makings of a great movie.
My book and read it. That'll be my weekend reading.
Barry has been going back and forth with Dan Gordon, and the final. I haven't sent this to you, Barry, but Dan's final remarks to whether or not he knew the story. He said, I know the story of Sarah Aronson and the Nikki spies really well. I actually wrote a screenplay about her 40 years ago, and at one point, Barbara Streisand was semi-attached to play the part. Unfortunately, absent Gal Gadot, the Israeli actress, superhero, all that, possibly even with her, there's not a chance in hell it could be made today. But congrats on the book, Barry Shaw. So Dan, congratulating you on this work. I want to read the story for sure. Barry, we'll be back to you this week.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Enjoy the book, Susie.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks so much for coming on. We look forward to speaking with you later in the week.
אנחנו מכריזים בזאת